Thank you everyone for joining us. We're excited for this conversation today with Stacy London and Nina Collins. Everyone knows Stacy from What Not to Wear, but she is also the CEO of State of Menopause. And I just want to let everybody know that we are recording this session. So just so you're all aware of that. And if you could mute your mics just until it's question and answer, that would be fabulous. And we also invited Nina Collins, who is from The Wolfer and a former literary agent. And she is now Chief Creative Officer of Revel. So, and we are, Bridgett and I, my co-host Bridgett of Hot Flashes and Cool Topics podcast, we are having the best time on Revel, getting to know everybody and starting our own groups and working with women. And so thank you for making it such a warm welcome, Nina. We appreciate it.
We are loving having you. I was just saying before we started officially that the Hot Flashes and Cool Topics gals are our favorite partners at the moment. We love your
Thank
energy.
you.
We're very, very happy. And as I was saying to you earlier, it's made me realize this idea of kind of creating a big tent where women over 40, I mean, our idea, if it works, is that all women over 40 will know Revel is the place where they can find their people. You can create a group, you can find a group, you can find an event, et cetera. So welcome, really love having you. And I know Stacy already and love Stacy. So very glad
I was going to say, hey, we're part of Revel too.
Stacy and I are buddies.
Revel.
Yes.
And we adore working with Stacy too. So it's been an absolute pleasure. So I wanted to start the conversation by saying, Stacy, you were known on TV for fashion, but you pivoted a 180 in the last couple of years for State of Menopause. Can you talk about your personal experience so that women can understand why?
Of course. And I think, I have been doing a lot of press around this because it is kind of an interesting pivot, right? I mean, I have been involved in style my entire career, and it's really in my DNA. But I got to a point where, one, I started to feel like what I wanted to do in television was not what television wanted me to do. And that was a real existential crisis in and of itself, because what I wanted to do in the last show that I pitched around to, channels and streamers and things like that was about middle-age transformation and how a pivot is possible and how intergenerational mentorship is so essential to that, and was completely shot down. Crickets in the room. And while I was experiencing this feeling of like, gosh, have I aged out of television? Is this the end of my career? Really asking sort of the big questions that I think do come up for us in middle age. Not just that, there's the possibility of decreased earning potential, or the possibility that you're going to get, shoved out of a company because somebody younger will do it for cheaper, whatever it is. Even if you're at the height of your career, what happened to me was that I was hit with menopause in a way that I was not prepared for, that no doctor or care practitioner had really informed me about. And that contributed to this feeling of cultural irrelevance. I didn't feel good. I didn't look the same. And it took me forever to connect the dots and put those pieces together and realize that what was actually physiologically happening to me was impacting me psychologically, in terms of my self-esteem, in terms of my feelings of self-worth. And State of Menopause was started as a brand at another company, and they asked me to be a beta tester. And I was like, thank God anybody is thinking about this. Thank God anybody is thinking about the way that I look, or the way that I feel, or that I don't feel like myself. And once I started becoming a beta tester, I really loved the products. But to be completely frank, I felt like they were very short-sighted. They had these great categories: cooling, hydration, relief, for things that are happening to us in menopause, like hot flashes, like the fact that our skin gets so dry, like the fact that we are having muscle fatigue and joint pain. But to me, skincare is not the beginning or the end of this situation. So we are taking this company and growing it to really be about acute, symptomatic, even though I don't love to use the word symptoms when it comes to menopause because it's not a disease, relief and treatment that is over the counter, that is not contraindicated with hormones, but doing this in a way that listens to the consumer and really tries to figure out what her needs are going to be. And we are a response to that. So, I started with this company in one place, and we are taking it to another because it is becoming more and more apparent that certainly women over 40, and not just people who are coming to menopause, let's say between that top of funnel 40 to 60. We also have women who are dealing with surgical menopause or medical menopause, or those people who are non-binary who are experiencing menopause. These are all issues that are not raised because there's no menopause ecosystem. There's no vertical for us, right? And we've got companies like Hello Revel, we've got podcasts like you, and we need to gain more traction. All of us working together is what is going to create a sort of one-stop understanding of where you go when you need answers, when you need camaraderie, when you need to commiserate. And these are all things that, State of as a company is involved with. It's why we want strategic partnerships with Hello Revel. It's why we want to be, I want to be interviewed on your podcast. It is about sort of, screaming that message from the trees, because even if you're not comfortable talking about menopause, even if you feel stigmatized by it, even if you feel stigmatized by aging, you don't have to scream it from the rooftops to know that there's help. We'll do the screaming for you.
Yeah,
But we want to meet people where they're at so that they get the relief and the answers that they need without having to broadcast it if they don't feel comfortable.
Yes. Yeah, to be a resource. And I wanted to add, if someone in the audience has a question, we do have the chat box open, and you can type that in there if you have a question or any comments or anything to add.
Yeah, and I would say also, if you want to just raise your hand, I'm pretty good at monitoring. the
Okay,
chat.
great. That's great,
Okay,
Nina. Thanks.
Nina is the official
Nina,
hand
thank
raise
you.
monitor.
Yes.
There you go.
I have no problem moderating the moderating.
Wonderful.
So one of the things that we have noticed with our listeners, because we get a lot of menopausal questions obviously with hot flashes, we get a lot of menopausal questions, is that they want something that is going to help a symptom. They don't want to just look at generic stuff. And I love that State of Menopause, you've gone out of your way to really address the symptoms. So women can go online and look up hot flash or dry skin or cystic acne or things like that. Was that always your plan to do that, or did that kind of grow?
From day one. So when I inherited the company, or I acquired the company, let's be clear, right? I inherited the website as it was, and I was like, this is absolutely unacceptable. It does not address things the way they need to be addressed. And certainly for people who don't know what's happening to them exactly, or are very confused by, seemingly unrelated issues, we want you to be able to search by symptom, simply because that may be the only way that you know that you're coming to menopause. And that list is going to keep growing with new product development. The idea is, there are 34 common symptoms of menopause. We are going to make as many products that directly affect those issues, because 85% of postmenopausal women will say that they had one or more symptom that actually interfered with the quality of their daily life. That's unacceptable. I mean, it shouldn't be the case. And what I'm really learning is that the more that you know ahead of time, the more information and education you have, it actually impacts the experience of menopause. Knowing about it before it happens actually helps you through the experience. And that's not to say it's all terrible, right? Menopause is an opportunity, but we just don't see it as that because we're still grappling with what is happening to us physiologically or how we feel emotionally, right? There's a ton of anxiety. There can be depression. There can be meno rage, right? All of these things that don't necessarily make sense. Why do I feel differently? Doesn't give you the opportunity to look at menopause for what it is, an actual time to pause. I keep thinking this is like a built-in physiological fail-safe, so that you have to stop in the middle of life and start to think about, what do I want? How am I taking care of myself? Do I have a support system? This happens to us for a reason. And it's not about the end of your use value, because we're not reducing women's worth to their reproductive health. This is about, what are we doing at this stage of life to really enjoy life? And I just see it as a great opportunity.
Absolutely. So many people don't realize, if you've been on one of our talks before, you probably have heard us say this, but so many doctors aren't educated in menopause. And we have talked to the doctors that are and trying to get the word out about menopause. And a doctor we spoke to just last week is really trying to start a whole course to make it mandatory for OBGYNs and family physicians to take a refresher, or what the hours they have to
continuing medical education.
Yes. To have that in menopause. So it's
Yeah.
just getting the word out to people, because I know many women will go to the doctor and talk about what's going on, and they are just kind of like, well, this is just what's going to happen to you,
Right.
or things are going to happen. And she's not really trying to, they're not trying to put down doctors, because they're really just telling you what they have learned. But it's just getting the word out. Yes.
Yeah, it's getting the word out. And I also think it's knowing that, look, not everybody needs to see a physician in order to find the right kind of care. So, this is the other thing that's driving me a little bit crazy. Aside from the fact there's only 2 hours of menopause training in medical school, there are, in fact, other courses that you can take, medical courses, to certify you as a specialist in menopause. But also that there are so many care practitioners that you may find more helpful if you don't want to go the hormone route. Now, that's just, I am not knocking hormones, by the way. They were villainized in the 90s and the early aughts when they should not have been. And I think a lot of women have had to suffer who didn't have to if they had just been recommended hormones. But we're seeing a huge rise in HRT and bioidenticals, but that's not for everybody. And not everybody wants to take that route or can take that route due to other issues. But what really bothers me is this idea that, we should expect more from our medical care. We should expect more from healthcare in general. And that includes information, and also recognizing that your GP doesn't specialize in menopause. Your GP
Right.
may be an internist. Your gynecologist may be an OB gynecologist and not as concerned with your life health as much as your reproductive health. So we need to talk about the fact that you have to know where to look, right? That not all of these doctors are going to be responsible for your menopause experience. They're focused on other things. It's like coming to menopause through medical menopause, like breast cancer, or some version of chemotherapy or radiation. Your oncologist wants to cure your cancer. They're not really interested in whether or not you're experiencing medical menopause. That's where we need a bigger support system. That's where this, talking to your best friend, 20% of women say they'd rather talk to their best friend than their doctor about menopause, because they know they're getting somebody who loves them, who cares for them, who doesn't want to see them, struggle, instead of a doctor who's like, this isn't really my area. So just, I think it is really important that you know where to look. We know that NAMS is certainly one place, National North American Menopause Society, but places like Electra Health as well, Genève as well, are really kind of trying to do something in the telehealth space to coach people and help people through this particular life iteration.
I think you were going to say something, Nina.
No, I agree with all of this. I mean, I think some doctors, I saw a great urogynecologist in New York a couple of years ago, who's one of those doctors who's in the camp of like, menopause is not a disease. And that's one approach. So I think what's complicated about it is just this, like, you can go in a number of different directions. You can find a great OBGYN who specializes in menopause. There aren't a lot of them, but they do exist and they will really help you. But you might be someone for whom acupuncture is really the solution. Or like for me, I went on HRT after a couple of years of really suffering and I feel fabulous. So the other thing that Stacy was saying about, this.
Who's Stephanie?
I don't know where that came into my head. Sorry, sweetie. That idea of like taking a pause. In my experience, I feel like for a lot of women, that period between 45 and 50 is when it's really hardest, when you're having all these symptoms, don't really know what to do with them. And for some women that can be later, because menopause happens obviously at different times for different women. But I think perimenopause is when it's super confusing and really hard. And often when we get to kind of the other side, when our period has really stopped for a couple of years, for a lot of women, it's just like the best time of our lives. Like I feel really great. And so I feel very motivated to help women younger than me now. I'm 52, kind of women in their 40s, anticipate what's coming, figure out ways to deal with it. I mean, I think brands, like what Stacy's doing, there are a lot of brands that will help lots and lots of people. So it's figuring out how to fine tune your symptoms, your emotional response, the psychological aspects. There really is a lot going on. And it's 100% true that most of the time when you go see your internist, he or she will say, they'll like offer you trazodone, like a sleeping pill, or
Right.
they'll offer you birth
Or
control
Xanax
pills,
or
Xanax, or they'll basically
exactly.
say, they'll kind of
Antidepressant.
right, or they'll
Mhm.
kind of shrug and be like, yeah, it's aging, it'll be okay. But I do think, also back to what Stacy was saying earlier, I do think it's changing. I do think women like us, are really having a dent. I think the whole public conversation is changing, and that for women coming up, for any of us who have had children, for our daughters, I really do believe now this is going to be a different experience. I mean, I think we are kind of at the beginning of it, but you can feel a change. Like, people who didn't know what menopause was 2 years ago know what menopause is now. I think it's seeping into the
1,000%.
public. Yeah, which is awesome.
1,000%. And,
yeah.
I don't think that the needle moves as quickly as we would like. And I certainly have to remind myself, this is a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah.
But absolutely what Nina is saying about being able to educate those who are younger than us, who may not get here. Again, it really is so important, because that education affects the experience itself. If you knew what was happening to you when it was happening, it would make it a lot easier for you to deal with, right?
I mean,
if you don't know what the hell is happening.
Right. That's why I started my community, because I didn't know what was happening. Oh, here's a question for Stacy.
Yeah.
Nancy would love to hear your thoughts on the connection between changing hormone levels that occur in perimenopause, menopause, and medical issues like osteoporosis and heart disease. A lot of focus seems to be on the more transitory symptoms like hot flashes. It's a good point.
It's a great point. In fact, and this is another reason that I think menopause is such an opportunity, right? If you don't know me, you probably haven't heard me say this, but if you do know me, you probably heard me say it 1,000 times. Menopause is an opportunity because we are not dying at 50 years old. This is not the 1700s, right? We are living well into our 90s, which means that we are looking at another 40 years of being able to live life well. And what that does mean is that menopause is also a great fail-safe, because we need to start looking at our health differently. And you are absolutely right that there are underlying conditions like osteoporosis, pre-osteoarthritis, cardiovascular issues, blood pressure, rosacea, eczema, psoriasis. A lot of autoimmune diseases can show up during the menopause hormonal shift. And it is important that those are things that you start to discuss with your doctor. But how are you able to know that unless you know that this is part of the menopause experience, right?
Right.
And your doctors, if they're telling you, oh, it's menopause, you'll get through it, they're not actually talking about all of the issues, brain, cognitive health, all of these things that are going to start to change. For example, Dr. Lisa Mosconi is a great resource for, she's a researcher on the brain and menopause, and how because of menopause and because of the shift in hormones, it is very possible that that brain fog is really the start of amyloid plaques in the brain. Now, that's a marker, not an indicator, but a marker that shows up for early Alzheimer's and dementia. Now, if you know that, you can protect against that. You can be eating your brain foods, you can be playing your brain games, you can be doing all sorts of things so that those plaques don't ever become anything but just there. And we don't talk about this enough in a mainstream kind of way. So I truly appreciate the fact that somebody would bring that up. And again, a company like State of is not, we are over the counter for rapid relief. So we would not be engaging in the kind of medical things that you might need to look at. But that's where doctor education is so important.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually
we
really
agree.
good point.
I would also add that, we've done a couple of episodes. We did one with Claire Gill, who is the chief of the Osteoporosis Foundation right now. And she had some great information on how your bone health, really your bone strength is defined by age 25. And after that, you're really just trying to keep it going for the time.
Together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're trying to keep, regeneration is so complicated. And then you add estrogen loss and forget about it. So we do talk to her. And we also talked to Lisa Larkin about heart health for women. There are some great experts out there, but we've got to get the information to the mainstream. We have to have women understand that it's not just menopause is not just, yes, menopause is one day, but you could have up to 10 years of perimenopausal symptoms, and the effect of estrogen loss lasts well into postmenopause. So there's so many issues. And one of the things I really appreciate what you do, Stacy, is that you talk about diversity. And that you've met one menopausal woman, you've met one menopausal woman. Can you talk a little bit more about why it was so important for you to add diversity into the
Yeah.
conversation?
I mean, originally it was just part of my ethos, right? I mean, I don't want menopause to be a cisgendered white woman problem, right? Like, oh, boo-hoo me, I have hot flashes. There are, of course, when we talk about diversity and socioeconomic diversity, there are going to be women who simply have to white knuckle through because they're, worrying about their kids, or they're in shelters, running from domestic abuse. I mean, there are a lot of other things that we need to worry about, right? That this should be a bigger conversation. One, about the bio-individuality of menopause. That's why every doctor will tell you, when did your mom go through it? Because that's one, the biggest indicator. But two, that there are differences across ethnicities in the way in which hormones drop and the way in which they fluctuate. And we can't just ignore that because we're deciding that everybody goes through menopause. All people with, female reproductive organs are going to go through menopause. It's not a high class problem. It is a problem that affects all people with reproductive organs, right? Female reproductive organs. We can't just decide that we're taking this one sliver of the population and saying, well, you can afford cosmetics that are good for your skin, or you can afford to spend on this, that, and the other thing. We want to make sure that we are getting help to everyone and anyone who needs it across the board. It's why we care so much about price point. It's why we donate product wherever we think that it's needed, where we can be helpful, because this is a conversation about so many other things than just menopause. It's about sexism, it's about ableism, it's about racism, it's about socioeconomic diversity. It is one of the hotbeds of almost every systemic dismantling that we are reckoning with in our culture right now. And that's what makes it so important. It's not just the effects of menopause, it's the effects of menopause societally and culturally.
Absolutely. And we have talked to women that have quit their jobs because of what they're going through with menopause. And so they're economically, they are financially and economically, they are affected by that. And it really is something I know that Great Britain has really pushed forward to really, yes, they've brought it before Parliament to have insurance as well. They are insured, but just to have things paid for better for women going through menopause.
Well, I don't know if you saw today, there was an article that Kellogg's is now doing paid leave for menopause in England, not
in
England.
Not in the US.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
In England. But I think, you're absolutely right. This is exactly what we should be talking about, both in terms of when we're talking about women's rights and what that means. And I do think this is something that is going to have to go before Congress. I do think we're going to have to talk about paid leave for menopause. I do think we're going to have to talk about what the support system is that women need so that they get what they need during menopause. And, not to, again, I don't want to Debbie Downer this. I remember I had a millennial sort of clap back at me on Instagram saying that I was using scare tactics to talk about menopause. And I was like, well, let's take a step back from that, right? Scare tactics are only scare tactics if one, that was my intention, which it was not. And two, if you think they're scary, what I'm trying to do instead of scare you is prepare you. And there's a big difference because, as Nina will tell you, and I think Nina is a great example of this, we can be flourishing in this stage of our lives, feel great in a way that we didn't know was possible. But we are both culturally and societally told that we're sort of at the end of our use value, right? And then on this other side of that, not having to do with aging. Aging and menopause are two different things, right? If you are coming to menopause chronologically, it just hits you when everything that you're culturally told about aging is what's happening. So, I mean, it's a double whammy. So I said to this millennial, you're not here yet. I hope that when you get here, you'll know that all this work was for naught, right? That you will be more in control of what is happening to you and be able to make smarter choices based on the information that we have provided for you.
Nina, what was your personal experience with menopause? Did you have a challenging time, or did you?
I did. It was horrible. I mean, well, I don't think it was that horrible, but it was pretty shitty, probably fairly typical. I'd say at 44, my period started getting spotty, kind of alternating months. I didn't really notice much else. And then what really happened was at 46, I started waking up at 4 a.m, bolt awake. And I was really kind of traumatized by it because I'd always been an incredible sleeper my whole life. So suddenly I was waking up. I mean, everyone knows what that's like here on this call, I would imagine. And I was really confused And that's what led me actually to start the community. I went online, I Googled, I figured out that I was in perimenopause, that kind of insomnia is typical. I had no idea when it would end. I wasn't getting any sleep, but I was not at the beginning having hot flashes. Then I guess at 48, I had some hot flashes, but they weren't that bad. And my mom died of breast cancer, premenopausal breast cancer. So I was resistant to go on hormones. And at 48, I got my last period. And my doctor kept saying, I think you should go on hormones. And I was like, no, no, no. I was having some sleep issues and some hot flash issues. And I was feeling fat and demoralized and kind of like, what was my future? You know, I was feeling a lot of the things that I was on my second marriage that wasn't so great, and my kids were leaving the house. So it was a combination of physical things and emotional things, as it often is. And then I would say over the next couple of years, to Nancy's question, my cholesterol started going up. I had all these urinary issues. I basically had a few years where I was seeing doctors constantly, and it was kind of that, is it cancer or is it menopause thing? I was having like constant need to urinate, which turned out to be, my muscles are too tight. I ended up seeing a urogynecologist and solved that. So it was a lot of trial and error. And I really do think if someone had sat me down when I was 44 and said, these are the things that are going to start to happen that you're going to need to look out for. This is how we can help. These are different specialties. You're going to need to check out your heart. You're going to need to start thinking about your bones. No one said any of that to me. And I live in New York City and have fantastic medical care. I have great insurance. I have access to the best doctors. So this is really why I started the community. I was shocked at the lack of information. But then I will say at age, I guess, 50, my hot flashes came back with an unbelievable vengeance. I hadn't had a period in 2 years. And suddenly I was waking up 15 times a night. I was having to lay down on the couch in the middle of the day. I couldn't work. I was like, this is not. And I finally realized like the lack of sleep was probably worse for my health at this point, anything than going on hormones. So I went on a low dose patch. I'm on a 0.0025 estradiol patch. Also, of course, in that period, I did a lot of research and learned that in fact, it's probably not so bad for you in terms of breast cancer, that there's been kind of a reversal of thought on hormone replacement therapy, that I can't stay on it forever. But now I don't feel terribly anxious about being on it. I feel like it's probably fine, and probably very likely, as a lot of people are saying now, good for things like my brain health and my heart health. So like everything, it's a trade-off. So anyway, I'm on 0.0025 estradiol and 100 milligrams of progesterone, and I sleep like a baby again. And pretty much everything has gone away. I've also just in the last 6 months, I'm 52 now. I've lost 15 pounds. So the weight that I gained and could not lose has suddenly come off. I mean, not instantly. I went on Weight Watchers with actually the help of a Revel group. Mondays at 1:30, we have a weight watching group. My skin looks great. I don't know. I mean, as great as a 52-year-old skin can look. I'm not saying I'm 25 again, but I feel strong. I'm doing weight training. I really feel like strength training is key to our health at this point.
Couldn't agree more.
And I'm doing it like 3 days a week. I'm doing this half-hour class called Ola Kaola, which is also on the Revel site. There are 2 free classes a week, and I'm paying for additional ones. So I feel like I think Nancy's question is really right on, that there are all these health things that we have to pay attention to. And I hate to have it come down to such basic things like sleep, more water, strength training. I'd say my one vice is still alcohol. I drink pretty regularly, 1 to 2 glasses of something a day. I know I should drink less. I know it's not great for my health, but I feel really good. And I feel like I'm doing all the other things pretty well. I take biotin. My hair is not what it once was, but it's, not so bad so far. So that's been my menopause.
It sounds like but again, you started at 44 and now you're 52 and you're just really starting to feel like yourself. And that's a long period of
8 years,
time.
yeah.
It's a long time. And actually one more plug I will give for community. I will say that I think part of the reason I feel so good is because of the community that I kind of unwittingly created, because my mother died when she was 46. So I didn't have my mother to advise me about menopause. And I really realized in retrospect that I think I created the community when I was 46, and I really kind of created a group of sisters and mothers. Like I learned from so much from all of you. And it was women in the community in their 50s and 60s who said to me, you're going to feel better. Menopause actually ends up being the best part of your life. Like I promise you it gets better. And I didn't believe them. And now I know they were right. So I feel like I love the women in their 70s in our community, because I love being able to look ahead and knowing how great that's going to be and how much promise there is. And I don't mean to sound like a Pollyanna. I know everything is not great, but I use coconut oil for my dry vagina, like, whatever. I know lots of things are not great, but I feel wiser and happier genuinely than I ever have. So I think that's a good aging.
Yeah, I was going to say, look, I think, all of the things that we're talking about here are essential because they're just conversations that were only taking place on Facebook pages. If you could find the one that you felt like was aligned with you. Right now, we're actually out here talking about what community can do, and how important it is, again, just to say intergenerational mentorship is essential. I want to know from 70-year-olds what it's like to be 70. And I also want to know what it's like for 25-year-olds who are digitally native and who are, on a whole other path talking about sexuality and gender and like the way, and race and the way that they think about these things, so that we are creating companies that are not just based on the information that we have in front of us right now, but on information for people who are past this and information from people who are coming up. What do they need? What do they want? What makes them uncomfortable? And, barely anything makes them uncomfortable anymore. So why are we not having more of these conversations? Why is this not intergenerational? Why is this some weirdly stigmatized secret that you only figure out on your own when you get here? I mean, during COVID, the questions about menopausal issues went up 350% across the board due to, just by checking Google Analytics. That's because I think everybody had a moment to pause, and also under the strain and stress of, what was happening during COVID, I think our perimenopausal symptoms were amplified and certainly escalated. And, we just have people Googling questions. There is no one place to find information. And little by little, we're seeing it in every vertical of media, every vertical of consumer products. You're starting to see that menopause is making that dent. And, just as Nina said, we are getting there. But it also requires the consumer to insist and demand that that information be made available, that your doctors are trained in this way, and that you're getting the products that you need. All of these things become incredibly essential. And then we have to think about the people who don't have great health insurance, who don't have great doctors, who don't have the kind of access that some of us may have, right? How are we helping them? Where are the affordable options for them? And what does it mean if you don't have access to a computer and you can't have a digital community? How are you creating a support system within your community? All of these things are some of the issues, again, just in terms of Colleen talking about socioeconomic disparity and race. These are things that are real problems that we have to tackle head on.
I really agree. I want to mention this website, this nonprofit called Let's Talk Menopause that is just launching, run by a woman named Samara Daly, because they are really trying to tackle just that. They're doing a public education campaign on buses and in subways, and they're trying to raise money for it, but to really spread conversations about menopause everywhere. Obviously, it shouldn't be for women who have great access to healthcare. It should be for everyone. It's super, super important. And to the coconut oil thing, I'm a huge fan. So coconut oil in your vagina twice a day. I've been doing this for 6 years. I've met 1 or 2 women who have said that it's given them, it makes them feel itchy, or I've asked many, many doctors, like overwhelmingly people seem to say it's totally great. And no, I do not use an inserter. Kindra has an inserter with their vaginal.
I was just going to bring up that. Yeah. But you can also put it in your bathtub. You can soak twice a week extra virgin olive oil or coconut oil, and it's
I don't know, Colleen, I don't think it's enough to soak. Honestly, people ask me how to do it. You literally just take some and you stick it up in your vagina and you like swish it around and put it on the outside and the inside. It's very easy. It's just skin, and it really makes a difference. And I had to say, last week I ran out and I thought, oh, it's fine, I'll get someone. I used my favorite lube is called Uber Lube. It's this great lube. And so I used some Uber Lube for a few days, and I felt itchy and uncomfortable. Like Uber Lube doesn't actually moisturize, it just coats you. It's good for sex.
Is that for sex, right?
It's great for sex. It's not, so it was an interesting experiment because it was the first week I haven't used coconut oil in, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 years. And I finally ran out and got more, and I feel so much better. With coconut oil in your vagina is awesome. And you do not need an applicator. like,
with that. We talked
some
to
people
yeah.
might.
Yeah,
some people
exactly.
might want to use it.
we
we
talked to
spoke-
Dr. Sherry Ross last week, and I think Kathy was on that call, and she was just saying you want to do this well ahead. Like if you're
Right.
somebody that hasn't had sex for, what'd she say, anniversary and birthday sex, if you're one of those people, or if you're someone that maybe it's been a while, maybe you've haven't had a partner for a while, that it's something where you want to start ahead, because that's such another really tough symptom is just dryness. Dry
Right,
vagina is
exactly.
so tough.
And she
No, I
was
mean, I
a big
think-
fan of
I
extra
really
virgin
think that's
olive
something
oil.
Yeah, doctors should really be talking about it in our 40s. You do not want to be
Absolutely.
after
Yeah.
the fact.
One of the things that I think is that we don't talk enough about is individual symptoms. Like, for example, joint pain. You have turmeric supplements in the State of Menopause line that I use every day because I was getting joint pain. I'm 54 and I will be the oldest living woman with perimenopause.
Oh,
Just
I
so
bet
everyone
I
knows.
bet I'm going to last longer than you.
Oh.
It's
Colleen, I should say I had horrible joint pain also in my perimenopause. Now it's completely gone. But
All
when
right,
I was
something to look forward to.
when I was
There
like
you go.
46, if I got up off the floor, I would like creak. It was insane.
yeah.
And I
I
also
think,
have to-
but oh, sorry, Colleen, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I also have to say that I was getting horrible hot flashes when I would get my period. And I started using the evening primrose oil, which is also a supplement. That helped tremendously. And I know a lot of women are looking for natural solutions. They have that
So
fear.
I like to, yes, I agree. I think that, and that's why coconut oil is such a good rec. But one of the things is, yes, we have turmeric on our line, which is to help with inflammation, in all of the body, not just your joints. And what I like to say about the supplements is that use them with something for acute symptomatic relief, and you are going to get the benefits of that. So evening primrose oil is great for quite a few things. It was great for me when I was younger, when I did have my period, for cramps, but it definitely helps with the severity and the amount of hot flashes that you have. However, the thing about supplements is they take a while to work, and you have to be consistent about taking them. So it's like, I'm like, if you're going to take the evening primrose supplements, fantastic, but have the cooling spray. So you have something either or, right? You have something that's working for you long-term, and certainly the evening primrose, turmeric, biotin.
Yes.
Bridgett just whipped it out there.
I keep it right there.
but the other funny thing is, like, biotin, Nina was talking about that, and we sell that at State of Menopause, which is for strengthening your hair, strengthening your nails, strengthening your bones. Like, it's an essential thing. But the thing is, again, consistency is key, and you do have options that are not medical. And, it is very important when we talk about bioindividuality, and Colleen, you're talking about joint pain. Joint pain is a very common symptom of menopause. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to get it. It just means it's one thing we can all agree on is something that can come up, right? So when I talk about bioindividuality, what that means is, based on your genetics, it depends how long you will have menopause. You will have vasomotor symptoms, which is what perimenopause, when they're at their worst, how long you'll have them, what ones you're actually going to have, and how severe they'll be. Or you may be one of these people who gets through it scot-free and it's not a problem. But then we're not just talking about menopause, right? Then there's the issue of menopause and middle age. And there is more than just the symptomatic issues or the impacts of menopause. If we are talking about this as non-surgical, non-medical, not a non-binary situation, what we are talking about really is also what middle age means, what it means for us as women, what it means for our earning potential, what it means for caring for children or empty nest syndrome, what it means for elder care or losing parents. There's a lot that is happening to us at this stage. It is not all in our heads. So there is the physiological impact of what happens in middle age because of menopause, and then all the other surrounding life circumstances that make it very complicated for us to be this age without some Sherpas. We need some guides at this stage of life. I have really decided that menopause is the Mercury in retrograde of life. It has all of these benefits that you don't see because you can't get past the shit. And that's what this is about. We are getting past all of the symptomatic stuff. We want to make it easier for you to deal with, to manage, to educate, to inform, so that you can get back to the business of your amazing life and figuring out what will make your life more amazing at this stage.
Nina,
Agree
you're
on all
gonna-
that. Do you guys mind if I talk for a sec about UTIs? Because I think the vaginal valium thing is really cool that people don't know enough about. So it's very, very common at this age, right, to have a lot of UTIs. And as we all know, you should wipe and wash after sex, and you should drink lots of water. Some people, for some women, it really is UTIs. For a lot of women, it's not. The symptoms are very, very similar to various kinds of pelvic floor dysfunction. So like I had a gynecologist who I loved, who's written 2 books on menopause, and she kept prescribing me medication for UTIs. And finally, I went and saw a urogynecologist, and she said, "You're not having UTIs." In my case, it was a tightening of the pelvic floor muscles for some women. And it's why also Kegels are not kind of one size fits all. Like we should not all be doing Kegels. For a lot of women, there's a form of dysfunction that's very common where your muscles get too loose. And for those women, Kegels are good. In my case, for example, the muscles are apparently too tight. Not that I have a super tight vagina. I would never have known my muscles were too tight. They're very specific muscles somewhere up there, but they spasm and it feels like a UTI. And so in my case, I was told that I should do pelvic floor therapy, which is super interesting. It's like it's like, physical therapy for your vagina. And it actually involves people like putting their hands up your vagina, but I couldn't do it because it was COVID. And so I ended up getting a prescription for vaginal valium through a compound pharmacy. And it's literally Valium capsules for your vagina, and the reason I came to it, this was again, one of these circuitous things, is I discovered when I was having these really acute pains that I initially thought were UTI, the only thing that made me feel better was taking a Xanax. So it was clearly a relaxing issue. And I ended up getting this prescription for vaginal valium, and it totally solved it. I've used it like 3 times, just once or twice. It was not a big deal. But I now have them in my refrigerator. You keep them refrigerated and they're there for an emergency. Lifesaver that I rarely see anyone talk about. So yeah, I think the whole UTI thing at our age, often it's pelvic floor dysfunction is really the message, and you should check that out.
And also, and I would highly recommend that there's an exercise company called Pvalve, and they specialize in pelvic floor exercises. They interestingly started.
How do you spell it?
P.Valve. So instead of revolve, it's Pvalve.
I spelled it P-E-E.
Yeah, no, it's just P. Yes, thanks, Nina. I love that you're just like taking everything and typing it in. You type
it's
it way
so helpful.
fast.
I've never heard of Pvalve.
It really is.
Yeah,
so they're incredible. And I started taking classes with them specifically because they had already done a program called Phase and Function, which is how to exercise during your menstrual cycle. And they started to talk with me about, well, what does a menopause exercise regime look like? What does that include? Because pelvic floor dysfunction is such a big thing that we can actually integrate into our exercise programs that we don't. And also, nobody told us to.
I know. And who knew this? It turns out that Peloton and squats are not great for the particular kind of pelvic floor dysfunction I have. No one tells you these things. Like we've all been using our Peloton all through COVID. And it turns out, I still use my Peloton, but you have to know these things. It's so hard. Pelvic floor dysfunction was a whole world that I knew nothing about. That was really interesting.
And you have to advocate for yourself.
Because
if you're not advocating for yourself, then the doctor has 15 minutes. They're not going to have the time to really explain to you what's going on. So you have to have the resources. Like I've never heard of Valium for your vagina. That's something new to me. Okay, that's great. But had we not had this conversation, I wouldn't have heard about it.
And that is why communities of women talking to each other are so crucial. I mean, I agree. That's why I'm shouting vaginal valium from the rooftops every chance I get, because it's awesome and no one talks about it.
So is that inserted, or do you take that orally, or?
No, it's inserted. It's literally like a
suppository,
like any other kind of suppository. You just stick it in and that's it. And it was actually really interesting when I went to the pelvic floor specialist. She put her fingers inside me and she said, "Oh yeah, the tight muscle is here on the left," and she like pushed something and I felt pain. Like she identified the muscle that was too tight, and she was like, "If you go to a pelvic floor specialist, this is what they would work on." I've still not done that. I've only used the Valium, and I haven't had an episode. I'd say I had maybe 4 episodes of really incredible pain between like 49 and 51, and I haven't had one since.
And I think it's also really important that we make that distinction that pelvic floor dysfunction is not one thing, right? So this idea that, there's thinning of the vaginal walls, that there's, the urogenital stuff, your muscles can get too tight, they can be too loose. There are so many things, again, going back to the individuality of this, not to just like beat a dead horse over here, but, it is really important, again, that you be your own advocate and that you are willing to go to your doctors and say, hey, I don't know if you're really the person to talk to. Who in my network is a better fit for this?
Yeah, like if you have
Because
6 UTIs, you need to see someone else. If like no one's
exactly.
bottom of it.
And this idea that your doctor's word is gospel is only good if the information that you are getting from your doctor helps you, right? That's the standard. And if a lot of people, I certainly fall into this category of wanting to be a people pleaser. So I'm always, it really took me a lot of courage to be able to go to my doctors and be like, you are not helping me. This is not working for me. And, not all of us have that problem, but certainly, we do take our doctor's word as gospel a lot of the time because that's what doctors are for, right? But at this stage of life, there is not enough specialty around this. And doctors are not necessarily willing to be able to recommend you to somebody else when they think they have the answer. Yeah. If you are not getting relief or help for the issues that you are experiencing, your doctor is not helping you. Yeah. That's it.
Exactly.
Let's hear
and there are options. You can go on North American Menopause Society and look for a doctor in your area. There are specialists. If your doctor uses the term just during your conversation, it's just menopause, it's just a hot flash, you need to find another doctor because there are ones that are specializing and they can be recommended. And I think that a lot of them just don't have the time or the education that they need in order to answer our questions. And speaking of questions, if you guys have any more questions, make sure to post them now because we're, kind of towards the tail end. And I want to make sure.
Atiba has one.
Yeah.
Oh, Atina has one. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Atiba. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay. I am 74 years old. I had a hysterectomy when I was about 46. I did all the things similar that they told you that I remember emotion. It was just whack. I did hormones. I heard that there were horse urine inside of the whatever I was taking. So anyway, I stopped. Now in my 70s, everything that I don't take anything that is pharmaceutical. It's all natural. Now I have 3 daughters, 44, 54, what's the other baby? 46. Okay. And so now they're getting ready to go through menopause. And I don't even begin to know what to recommend to them, what to tell them, because I just suffered through it. It was just, you're that age. This is what happened. Mom, did she go through menopause? She said, no. My dad said, yes. It was, you're saying a lot. I don't know what to I really, besides what I do, when you talked about, I use CBD oil and peppermint oil on my joints. I use every essential oil you can think of for whatever it is that I need, and diffusers and all of the above. But can you recommend something that I can recommend to my 3 daughters? Because besides what I do, I don't know what to tell them.
So a couple of things, if I may, we want to talk a little bit about state of. All of our products are, for the most part, natural, but using that word is always a weird thing to say because even some chemicals are natural. So we're Leaping Bunny certified, as in we do not, harm animals in any way, shape, or form, and we are gluten-free and vegan. And we have, again, our cooling spray is made of peppermint oil and menthol oils. So I highly recommend that for hot flashes. Our joint cream is made with arnica. Totally natural. We try and use that because it's a proven effective. We have a CBD oil that is great for muscle fatigue. So just in terms of affordable, look at it, Bridget's got it all in front of her. But just in terms of some of the things that we're talking about, like we haven't gotten into sexual wellness yet, but when we do, boy, am I excited. Like our product development is on the way. But just to talk about some of the things that, as you're saying, all natural. So is turmeric, so is evening primrose, so is biotin, so is the coconut oil that Nina was talking about. All of those things are at least like the gateway, right? The gateway drug to getting you into understanding more about what's happening to your body. And I would recommend that to any of your daughters as a place to start, as well as something like Electra Health. I really believe in them as not just as a community, but because they did something called the 21st Century Guide to Menopause. And they list all 34 symptoms of menopause that are most common to women. And that is been for us a really essential guide in figuring out also product development and asking our consumers what they want to see next. So just in terms of being able to connect the dots, so your daughters have some idea of why all of a sudden they may have joint pain or headaches or burning mouth or hot flashes, or, the only two symptoms that are actually medically recognized in menopause are hot flashes and vaginal dryness, both of which we've talked about today. But there are so many more that you could dismiss as a zillion other things. So in terms of a resource, I think Electra is incredible. And, I'm very excited for everybody to be able to try our products when we get to that part of the conversation.
I would also say, Atiba, just to, not to toot our own horns, but Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, the podcast, we talk about all of the topics and questions that you may have. And I would actually ask the women here that if you have a topic or a question that you want us to get answered, email us. It's hotflashescooltopics@gmail.com. Bridgett, can you type that in for me?
Sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And if we can't answer the question, we will find an expert who can, because there is no reason in 2021 that you should not be able to find an answer for your daughters. That's why I have two daughters. Bridgett has a daughter. I don't want my girls to have to question this. I want them to go to Target and be able to find solutions that they can, or online. You go to State of, and there's so much information. Women are creating community, and that's what your daughters need. They need to be able to join a community like Revel. And we actually started a group called Hot Flashes and Cool Topics on here because we want to do a series. And, Stacy was so generous with her time. This woman is busy. Okay. So for her to take the hour for us, because it's so important that we get the message out that there's a community of women out here who are changing the narrative, not just in menopause, but in midlife, because it's not our grandmother's midlife. We are defining this space for however we choose to do that. So I hope that helps you a little bit. And please, guys, make sure to email us, because we love to have topic. As a matter of fact, our topic this week on Wednesday is menopause and essential oils, which Atiba was just talking about.
And I see, Shayla, do you have your hand raised? I think.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I do, thanks. And first of all, I just want to thank the panelists. This has been hugely informative. Stacy, not to idol worship here, I'm going to do it. But anyway, I really want to thank you for lending your celebrity to this conversation, because I have two of your products. I was on a previous call that you spoke on, and love the CBD oil, love the cooling spray. My BFF right now she's 5 years younger. I'm 55 and she's 50, and she's really kind of having a tough time. And so I gifted her these two things, and she really had some tears in her eyes, because she's like, oh my God, Stacy London is doing this? Like, yeah. So, and I think too, for my daughter, who's now 24, to be able to, she knows who you are too, right? I will snap and send it to her, and she's totally really super cool. I got cool mom points for that. But
I'm always happy to help there. I love a cool mom point.
I try. But no, I think just really not even having a conversation. I think, again, to your point, to my early point, I guess, about lending your celebrity this, it's not just the conversation within this group of women, it's also making it acceptable outside of this. So that if somebody does want to go on a menopause leave, that's a tough kind of flag to wave and say, I'm in a corporate environment. Yes, I'd like to take my leave now, because you also encounter all that other stuff too. So anyway, thanks all. I really appreciate the conversation.
I'm so happy to hear you say that. I want to say one of the other things that we're trying to do at State of is, if you go on the site, we have now started edits, like kits. And one of them is called the eye care package, which is really for friends to give to friends, for mothers to give to daughters, for sisters to give to each other. Doesn't matter who it is. Really, the idea is that we just want you to experience what we have to offer. And it is a cooling spray and samples of some of the other products that we make, just as an introduction. And, I really appreciate the fact that you saw your friend going through this and you were like, I can help. I can do something. I think, again, this goes back to the communities of both hot topics, hot flashes and cool topics. Hot topics and cool flashes also works.
We'll take them both.
Right, and Revel, right? These are communities where the conversation is taking place, and you know, one of the things that I will tell you is that it was my existential crisis, both about my professional career and what was happening to me physiologically. That this feels like the job that I felt like I was meant to do since I was on What Not to Wear. What Not to Wear was the first time I felt like I was in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing with my skill set. And that is exactly how I feel 20 years later. What I am doing now feels like it is completely connected to me, Colleen. You know, I didn't go back to this and say this before, but my whole life has been about look good, feel better, right? And now you can't look good without feeling better. You just can't. Like, and I don't just mean, you know, it's inextricably tied to style. Personal style in middle age is a whole topic that I want to get into, but it's really hard to feel good when you're hot flashing and you've got, you know, urogenital issues and you've got headaches or joint pain. So we want to deal with the stuff that is actually going to make us feel our best in order to have good self-esteem, in order to be self-aware, in order to, you know, raise our sense of self-worth, because we still live in a patriarchal culture that tries to break us down right now. And this is when I think we should feel our most powerful.